we are giving now the first ideas of what law is, and these ideas will shape all the knowledge that you will have in the career and the life about law, and will have a lot of consequences in your life, much more than you can imagine for sure. So it is important to take care of this idea that I will explain, especially today, because nowadays there is a lot of positivism in all the courts, in all the lawyers, in all the barristers, solicitors, and so on. So that's why it's so important to know very well first the history of positivism, the first topic that we will talk about. Then I'll list some names, some of the greatest authors that develop this part of the science or this approach to law. So let's begin with the history of positivism. Well, by the way, well, Melissa, if you can admit Paul, great. Perfect. So the positivist approach to science, not only to law, to all kind of science, more or less we can think that it begins more or less, well, in the beginning of the modernity, on this part of the history of humanity, of humankind, the modernity. So it is very interesting to know how modernity begins, no? Because if we take care of that, how modernity begins, we will see that this very logic consequence, all the things that authors will say in the first beginning, in the first part of the 20th century. And well, more or less, we will understand better all things that we are trying to say, all these authors. So the modern era begins with a lot of changes in the world, but especially with a new conception of science, of what must, in what things that we must believe, what things, and for sure you know very well this man. At least something about, you have heard about René Descartes. Descartes, well, was a philosopher, mathematician. Well, he know so many science, and he lives in a world that, well, there were so many battles, religious battles between, well, all kind of Christianities, movement and ideas, and he realized that there is, well, there seems to be that there will be no end in that kind of battles. So on the other hand, he realized that in mathematics there is no battle. The people just only try to understand how it works, math, and in this way he thinks the best science here is math. Why we don't apply the same method of math to all kind of science? And this is the first idea, the first aim, the first goal that Descartes tried to do and to aim. So he said, well, in math you only believe in some ideas that are clear and you can find and you are evident. And we will, from now to the end of of our lives, will only try to believe, at least in science, in that kind of things that we can find some kind of evidence. Well, but we have to doubt about anything. Probably you will remember his first idea. He said, well, we can doubt about anything in our lives. Also, we can doubt that there is an universe, that there is a professor in your classroom or trying to say something. Well, you can doubt anything because there could be, I don't know, he said, malignous demon, a demon that is, well, is giving you that kind of image, but it's false. All things are false. But there's one idea that I never will doubt. And it is this idea, cogito ergo sum. Well, if I think in anything, no, there I can doubt so many things, but I cannot doubt about that I'm existing now. I have some being, and so my existence is something that I cannot doubt. And then he with this idea tried to prove the existence of God. Yeah, this is a little tricky. It's not so easy. And second, after his kind of proof of law, God, using the first idea, the cogito ergo sum, he said, well, I'm not perfect, and I have an idea that is perfect, so God must exist. So seems to be a little tricky. No, so many people follow him in that idea, but in any case, he did that, and he thinks that he proved the existence of God, and then after that, after proving God, they decide to prove the existence of the universe, the existence of the professor that is speaking now with you in this lecture. Well, it's very difficult to that, but not so many people say that, follow him in this. And the fourth stage, well, is after proving the existence of the universe, they took from this idea, from the existence of God and from the universe, all the subjects, all the science. So it's incredible, no? Just from 3 words, they get up, get all the science from there. Well, it's so tricky, but the people used to, at least to take the methodology. Well, we will try to follow only ideas, clear and distinct perceptions, no? Something that is evident. We will not follow all things, but the things that are evident, we will try to follow. Yeah, and that's the beginning of the modern era. So it's very interesting that with this approach, quite different from the Greeks, and we can speak a lot of the philosophy, classical philosophers of the antique world. So, but he, with this methodology, I don't know if you realize that he divides quite good or worst to res. Res means thing. 2 kind of things. The res extensa, the thing in the space that have some extension, and the res cogitans, the thing that are in my mind. Now, the lake, res extensa, things with space and think without a space, res cogitans, my ideas. No idea have any kind of space. So it is very interesting because the Greeks, the classical philosophers, used to put together, well, in some sense, they say that obviously there are some differences, but there are some relations, no? And for Descartes, there is not so much relation. No? Well, there was a lot of philosophers along the modern area that are trying. One of them developed more the res extensa, others the res cogitans, and there appears well more or less some materialistic philosophers and others, the idealists. For example, Hegel, no? He developed the res cogitans so much, and so on. And then, at the final time of the modern era, appeared that guy. For sure, you will know who is him. Him is Immanuel Kant, a great philosopher that for many people is a synthesis of the modern era, a synthesis of the first two great movements, the empiricist and the rationalist. It's a kind of synthesis, a great synthesis that he tried to do between these two great movements of philosophers. So we will try to understand as much as possible Immanuel Kant. For sure you have heard something about him, but it is very important to understand the philosophers of the law in the 20th century, first to understand Kant. Who is Kant? Well, he's a philosopher, a German philosopher, very organized, by the way, and he developed so many parts of the science, but first of all, he developed, well, the theory of the knowledge, no? And he made a critique to the reason, no? How the reason works in the humankind. So he realized that, well, there is a world, no? A world. All the things in the world, in the universe, in the cosmos, well, we know more or less that outside of our mind there is something. We don't know very well what kind of things could be outside of our minds, but there is a cosmos, no? A cosmos, no? A world, and it is very interesting, see? because how we can know the world, the things that are in the world. Well, more or less, we can touch things. No, with our eyes we can see things. With our ears, we can hear well sounds, noises, and so on. But and there's the most important part of Kant's theory of knowledge. There is a problem because our senses, our potencies, the touch, the smell, the vision, etc. There is a problem because we cannot know very well what is outside of us. Why? Because we can only feel things. And feel, obviously, the earth gives us some notice, some information, moves our nerves, moves our hand, our touch, our eyes, our ears. Outside of us, there is a chaos, a phenomenon. It's a chaos. We cannot understand very well what is that chaos of things. We only have phenomenon. Well, it's quite different, the noumenon and the phenomenon. Why? Because, for example, there could be a world with water and so many things outside of us, but in our finger, the world is so different. It's just probably here is, well, is something that is moved by that moves our finger, and here the, let's say, in the first part is probably is just a little electricity that is going by our nerves, by our body, no? And it's quite different, that little electricity, than the world. It's quite different, no? It's quite different. It's the phenomenon, no? And so on, and it's quite different in each part of our body, no? And when all these things that came from our potencies, our senses, from the vision, the ears, the touch, and so on, are put together. There is not, we don't know if there outside there is a space or time, but we organize that kind of electricity things that are going inside of us, and we put the space and time, organizing all these kind of things that we receive, organizing the phenomenon. The space and time is in the phenomenon. It's interesting, no? And so, after this kind of organization, all these kind of things goes to our mind. In our mind, there's a lot of categories. The categories, for sure, you have heard something about the categories, no? So, what happened with our categories? Well, we have in our mind a structure, and when we think, we just put all the phenomena in a box, in a little box, in a category that could be done, and we fill that category. Well, more or less, this is the theory of knowledge of Immanuel Kant. And it's very interesting. It's a good effort to try to demonstrate, well, with the rationalist people that say that we have ideas. When we want, we have some kind of ideas in the very beginning of our lives in our mind. And with the empirists that say, no, we have no ideas in our mind until we have experience. So in this way, he is a kind of a synthesis of these two movements, saying, well, we have both things. No? So, but the problem there, I don't know if you really realize what is the problem with this theory of knowledge. Well, if we think that there is a world and there is an ideas and there is a connection between our phenomena and that box of ideas that we have, we can say, well, what kind of relationship could be between the world and the things, the phenomenon, no, that we have in our mind? Because the world is a chaos, no? And the answer is that, well, it's so difficult to relate these kind of things. There are two absolutely different things. We cannot put together one and another. At the final moment, we cannot understand the world very well, and it's quite different for knowledge. And what is the problem with this, no? With this kind of knowledge? What is the problem? Yeah, think about now, if there is no connection with these two things, the knowledge and the world, well, how we can develop an ethics and a moral science? No, it will be very difficult. For sure, you remember our first lecture when we talk about, well, the science of happiness and how we can get happiness. And we said, well, by our potencies, the potencies of our body, well, in contact with reality. Greek people used to accept that we can know and we can have access to the world. Well, this guy have no access to the world. So that's why it's very complicated for Kant and for the people who follow Kant, the neo-Kantians, to understand how could be the ethics, no? And more or less ethics, although he believes in natural law and morality. He wrote about the morality and ethics and metaphysics and so many things. You know? He wrote a book about the metaphysics of law. Well, but at the end of the day, if there is two worlds, well, the world of where things are, and the world of the where things ought to be. What is to ought and what is so different, no? The world of the mind and the world in the physical world, no? The things that are outside of our mind. So he for sure you remember at least this, no? The categorical imperative. The categorical imperative is, well, as you know, and as I told you, in our minds, according to Kant, there are so many categories, no? Well, and one of the most important categories that we have in our minds, that we have to follow also, and is the foundation of ethics, is this, the categorical imperative. This is the foundation of ethics, no? Act only according to that maxim, whereby you can, at the same time, will be that it should become an universal law. Well, it is one text of the categorical imperative can formulate the categorical imperative in three different ways. No? Another way was, well, try to do all things in a way that you will be proud of yourself of doing that. Yeah. And there's a third one. But in any case, this kind of morality is quite different from the morality of the Greeks, of the morality of the happiness, and of the good, common good. Also is quite different. No, why? Because the classical morality will take care that we can be connected with reality, understand reality. But for Kant, reality is a chaos. World is a chaos. Phenomenon is not accessible. So the only thing that found ethics is in ourselves, in our mind, without any connection of the world. No? So it's an imperative, yeah, an imperative, as Kant said. No, it's imperative. You have to act according to the maxim. And what kind of maxim? Well, there could be this one or another one, another one. Well, at the end of the day, so many authors will say, well, my maxim is quite different. My maxim is alcohol, or drugs, or anything. No? Why the universal law? Well, because, well, it's so complicated. It's so complicated if you don't take care that you can understand the world. Well, it's a duty of the mind. Yeah, morality and law also, because he brought also about law. Morality and law are duties of our mind and connected with reality. Well, this is the part of the history that I will explain today. Not so much. We can have a course only about philosophy of modernity and the positivist approach. Well, but the positivist is very present there. No, you cannot make science without evidence. Without evidence, no. There is two worlds, two different. The world res extensa and res cogitans. The things that are outside and the things that are inside. The is and ought to be. So are quite different. In this part, I don't know if you have any kind of doubts. If not, I will follow the philosophers. Some questions, some comments, some need of able. I don't know.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So my question is on what is, which is in the mind, and what ought to be, which is outside the mind. So my question is,
no, what this is, well, it is not so easy because according to some authors well, could be so many things, but is probably could be the things that are outside and ought to be, or well, the things that we think that ought to be.
so it's different with different authors, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I will explain a little more when we talk about this, especially in Kelsen. Okay. Well, let's go ahead.
Prof, I have a question.
Yeah.
Sorry to take you back, but when you mentioned René Descartes, I didn't really understand the res extensia and res cognitas. Then a second comment would be for Immanuel Kant's theory, could we say that one of the criticisms should be that man's ability to perceive knowledge is confined to his sensory abilities, and therefore the knowledge of law that he was creating through evidence was only confined to the level of exposure and his ability to, his level of exposure to perceive those things that are outside of himself?
Well, there are a lot of things that we can make as a critique to Descartes. No? I think that also we can say that, well, I agree with that, no? But that also we can say that there is a good theory thing about this. No, he's creating the new method of the science. Yeah, it is very interesting. Well, there was a lot of problems with that kind of method, but he realized that we must put a method in science. But obviously, and the problem is for many people, well, that is not the only way that we understand things. We understand things first, watching things, hearing, no. And then also by faith. Faith plays a big role in our knowledge more than we can imagine. Faith in authorities. So many times we believe that it is law because, well, the president said that it is the law. Yeah, we have a strong faith in our authorities or in our parliament, and evidence, obviously, rigorous methodology on our thing, and not so rigorous also intuitions. There are so many ways that people in which the people get knowledge. But he realized that if we want to make science, properly science, well, the methodology must be more strict. Yeah.
Do you mind explaining res extensia and res cogitans again?
Yeah, but I think, well, yeah, it's so easy, huh? Res extensa is the thing that have the space. What kind of things have a space? Well, all the things of the universe, of our Earth, that lake, that bird, that tree, that, and on the other hand, there are things that have no space. Which one? Well, all things of the spirit, especially for Descartes, the ideas. Can you measure an idea? No, with any kind of meter or inch, or no, because they are outside of the space. Okay.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. Well, let's continue with these ideas, and now and that's why I remember just our last lecture. That's why positivism well said, well, metaphysics is not science, because we have not evidence about nothing there. Philosophy neither, and morality neither, and well, and so on. Law neither. That's why there was a great effort of many authors to make the science of law, and that is the aim of all these authors, no? To make law, to understand law as a science, as a great science, to study not only suppositions, but study things that you can prove. And that's why, well, this is the principal aim. The first author that we will see today is Jeremy Bentham. This guy. And Jeremy Bentham, who was him? Well, a great man, and the father of the utilitarianism. Some people say, no, one of the fathers, the great father, probably. He talked about so many things. Well, in economy also, in political science, and in law. About law, he said so many things, no? Especially in his books of law in general, of 1782. This book was republished by Hart several years after his life. Well, Hart made a second edition of this book in Oxford, a great edition, well, because he thinks that Bentham was a great author, that nobody take care very well of him. Well, in this book, in his theory of law, he understands that he tried to put a very big and comprehensive theory of law, where he tried to put together, well, not only law, but logic, politics, facts, economy also, no? Psychology, all this sciences, psychology, you will remember. Well, at that time was the very beginning of psychology science, no? So he thinks that we have to make a big theory, putting together all the knowledge that we have now, at that time, obviously, no? And founded, obviously, in the principle of utility. What is the principle of utility? Well, utility is a kind of ethics. Is a kind of ethics, and that said that what things you have to do. Well, the classical ethics, as you remember, say you have to do well the things that make you happy, and but try to not to see the happiness of the moment, but try to see all your life. No? We saw that Kantian's ethics was so different. No, well, try to be proud of yourselves. Try to do the things in the way that you can be proud of yourself, and you can make of this way of behavior an universal law. Another way of understand approach to ethics, he said, well, the only thing important is to see if things work. If things work, if there is any kind of utility, you know. If it helps us, for example, for gain some money, well, it is good. It is good because it helps to gain some money. And if well, obviously there are thing that is true behind this approach. That well, we will try to do the things in order to have the maximum benefits and the less harms, problems, kind of that, no losses, conflicts, and well, we will try to have the best benefits. But it is a critique to utilitarianism. It's an incomplete theory. Why? Because he doesn't realize that, well, benefits, the notion of benefits have no sense without an ultimate aim. It is very interesting. We can say that utilitarianism is true, but it's an incomplete theory, because the utility have no sense. The utility is just a mean, and a mean is a mean in order to another thing, in order to gain some other aim. Well, in any case, he realized that law is an expression of political facts. And it's remember, at that time more or less begins also some approach. Well, after that, some sociological approach, anthropological approach, but he realized, well, it have to be with political facts, no, more in a traditional way. And he said there could be any natural law. Natural law describes how things ought to be instead of how things are. Yeah, and there is a problem. One thing is the is, and the second is the ought. Law is, and morality is ought to be, must be. Well, and between these two words there is not point of connection. So you realize that he's following all the idea of modernity. It's a modern in this way of thinking. No, he just followed Kant. Well, and not only Kant, but so many authors of the modernity. In this point. So when he realized that common law have to do something with natural law, especially the notion, the first notion of common law. This is a law that everybody knows because it's reasonable, and reason is universal. No? So he said, well, it is not true. This is not true. Common law is just a private opinion in disguise. It's the mere opinion of men self-constituted into legislatures. Now, if you said, well, it is a wise man that say that something, and we have to follow this criteria because he said, well, it's just an opinion of that man, and nobody knows if he is wise or not. So you constitute his opinion into law. Yeah. So I think that obviously there are some people that put the opinion of others as a criterion, as a law. But we have to realize, no, if there is some reason to put that criteria. No? Think, for example, in one opinion. Some people, an antique wise man could say at that time, for example, you have not to kill the innocent people. Well, it really is an opinion, not. And some other people could put this opinion as a law, as the law of, and a president, and we will continue to follow that president. Well, what we will say about that? No? This is a great opinion. It's common sense. It's not an absurdity to follow that opinion because it is only opinion. Well, at the end of the day, what we have to do is follow good opinions, the opinions that convince us. No? Well, but he said that common law is a superstitious respect for antiquity, and stare decisis, following the antique precedents, is just arbitrariness. Yeah, that's why, because it is only an opinion and nobody knows if the opinion is right or not. Well, he don't. It's more or less like Hume, no? A skeptic, no? He don't realize that human can understand and can know reality in some way. Always could be better and always could be improved our knowledge of reality, or although it's always partial and contextual, but at the end of the day, we know something about the things that are outside of us. It is the problem with Kant, with Descartes, with so many people. So, finally, common law and natural law are entitled private and subjective because the abstractness of this notion. They are dangerous fictions. For sure, you remember Maine, and he appreciates so much fictions, you know, because he thinks that it helps to us to improve the law, to put some exceptions to the general law in order to close the reality and the law. But he thinks any kind of fiction is a fraud. Any kind of principle, of reason, of common law, of natural law is I think that is an abstract, and because it's an abstract notion, it's not true. It's just a private opinion. Well, that's why so many people think that he follows so much Hume. You know? In so many sense, no, it's a deception. We can know nothing, no, an skepticism. So, what other things we said about Jeremy Bentham? For sure, you remember our last lecture about the codification. Well, in Germany, that takes so much time. 1 century, the codification of civil law, and finally they got the BGB, the famous civil code of Germany. But instead of that, in the UK, there was no civil code. Instead of that, this guy, Jeremy Bentham, said, well, we need a codification. Nobody heard him at that time, no? Heard. So why we need a codification? And that's why he's one of the fathers of the positivist theory in nowadays, no? Because he thinks, well, we need a written law, a text with all the laws, a synthesis of all kind of laws. Why? Because if not, the decision of what is law, what is right, will be in the hands of the judge and company. And judge and company only have opinions. They're just an opinion. As you see, Bentham don't believe so much that some opinion could be true, or could be reasonable. So he said, no, if we want to be serious in the law, we must have one codification enforced and acted by the sovereign, and all the judges have to follow that law. So we need a complete body of laws based on natural and universal principles. Now, suddenly appears some universal principles. And the big question is, well, it's not possible that wise man of the common law, that wise judge of antique judge, could have in their mind this kind of principles, universal principles? For sure, yes. For sure, yes. Why? Why he thinks that the legislator is better than a judge? Because he have the power. Well, the power is a physical, almost a physical thing. But if you want to make a science of law, that kind of principles could be not only in the parliament, but also in the judge, and also in the any kind of citizen. I think so. This well, in some degree. So he puts the principle of utility in the center of his theory. He said that it dictates that the code should be structured in the most logical manner and formulated in the simplest language. Why? Because all people have to understand what is the law, and in order to help the citizens. So you have to be so clear when you are writing the law. Well, it is true, as you think about it. No? So he talked about. Sorry, I can hear you. Yes.
Sorry, my microphone seems to be the fritz. I'm using my laptop and phone to listen to. I'm using my laptop. Audio devices seem to be malfunctioning. So
okay, no problem.
Devices seem to be.
Do you want to say something or make a question?
Well, yeah, I was to ask a question.
Okay.
But
go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question.
So go on.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so you said last time that Bentham was it against codification? Because as per my notes, we had Bentham was particularly against codification, and then in the notes I noted that fiction is to law what fraud is to trade. I mean, could you just link it?
No. Bentham is not against codification. Frederick From Savigny was against codification. Bentham is pro-codification.
Okay, great. Yeah, because for a minute I was a little bit lost.
No. I was talking in the other lecture about Frédéric von Savigny, and today we just mentioned, remember him. That.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. That's about it. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Could you go back to the previous slide? Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yes. I said also that Jeremy Bentham was an exception in the UK, because in the UK nobody wants to make some code, civil code, no, that time. But he says, no, we must have a code, because if not, it will be only opinions, and law is not only an opinion of people. So this is the approach of Jeremy Bentham. So he said, well, what is law? It's an art, yes, but the art of legislation, no? How to put rules, no, for the benefit of empires. Yeah, it's incredible. No? Well, finally he developed the idea of have two kind of codes. One, the civil law, supremely repository of circumstantive, and the penal civil code that deals with sanctions and is commutative. So one is only regulates the things of the usual life, yeah, and the second one punish when you don't obey that rules. Well, more or less it is Jeremy Bentham. He have a lot of things, obviously, no. I just put some ideas of this author. You will read many more of him. In any case, I don't know if you have any kind of question of Bentham theory of law. Yes.
Excuse, could you please repeat your explanation on the two codes?
Well, it's so easy. He and at that time, I think that is very early, and there was not so many codes in the world, and he think that it probably could be a good idea have not only one code, as most of the states had at that time, but two, one for civil law and second one for penal law. Yeah, it is the only idea. And of course, you know, so many states now have now these two kind of codes, not only two kind of codes, now so many codes for so many kind, tax law, family law, and so many things, no? So, Ali.
So my question is, when he says that the art of legislation for the benefit of empires,
yeah,
the meaning of empires, and but, was this supporting legislation? Yeah,
well, the empire is probably a country, the nation. Obviously, in a more remember that he is an utilitarist, the father of utilitarianism. No? So when he mentioned the empire, he thinks, well, we have to put any kind of law in the way that it helps to most of the people. No, that could be util things. It could help as much as we can. And more or less is this is the approach of the utilitarianism. No? So well, there is a lot of details, but more or less. It's not so clear in any case, because empire used to, when we think about one empire, we think first in authorities, no, in the ones who have the power. In any case, well, he said that.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. So, any other question? If not, well, we can continue with the Jhon Austin. Jhon Austin. But we will have now the break because there are so many authors that I will try to follow. We will have 10 minutes of break from now, if you agree, and then we will resume the class. Let's see you in a minute. Jhon Austin. Who is Jhon Austin? Is this guy. This guy. He's a follower, a disciple of Bentham. So he more or less follow him in so many things. Also in his point of view, more or less of the law, and we will see not so much things, but we will think about especially the notion of law. It's more clear, we can say. No, it's not just a political fact, as in Bentham, but this is more restricted notion of law. In his book, The Province of Jurisprudence Determined, published in that year, 1832, he tried to understand law not as a, remember, no, at that time, all things that here like philosophy, morality, theology, were not so good, were not so well accepted easily by the people, because if you want to do science, you have to prove something. And if you want to do a science of the law, well, you have to manage things that you can prove that exist. And what kind of things you can prove that can exist? Well, not principles, no? Principles that is just an opinion, and could be another principle that is absolutely the contrary of the first principle. So all kind of reasons are just opinions. Remember Bentham, no? Just opinions. We don't have to follow private opinions. We have to follow what it is. And what things we can find in the real world, no? In that world, laws, written laws. If something is written, well, it's out of our mind it will be the law, no? So he wants to study the positum. Positum is the thing that is placed in some place, yeah, that is placed in the parliament, no? You can study, well, a book of law, remember, the author of the other day, no? The books of law and the books of actions, and the laws of actions. Well, these kind of things you can study. You can study, and we will do science about this. As you know, as you can see, this is that ideas we find so much now. No? You want to understand law, you have to understand what things are written. No, it's not just to know some kind of principle. No, well, I think that is a very reductionist way of understand law. But in any case, this is the principal aim at that time. No, we'll try to make a great science like math, like physics in law. And he understand that law have to be with punishment. So he have an easy concept of law, a law based in the idea of three things special, you know, a sovereign, a command, and a sanction. This more or less could be the way that he understands law. First, you need someone who enacts the law, who approves the law, to enforce the law. And if you don't have a sovereign, you will never have any kind of law. No? Well, we will see that the concept of sovereign he puts not always as such, because he realized that there could be some other kind of things very similar to the usual law, but in any case, in the hard notion of law, we need a sovereign, no? And so that's why we also need a centralized modern state with a lot of power, no? Then, well, there must be a commandment, no? Something that is imperative, not that command us to do something, or to take care, or not to do something. And finally, the sanction, no? The punishment. That's why people used to obey the law. They used to obey the law, no? Because there is a sanction. If you don't do that, you will receive some kind of punishment. You will go to prison, you have to pay a fine, or so many things could happen, bad things, if you don't obey the law. So why people used to say that he's a naive empiricist, as Morris said, no? Well, because yeah, laws for him is just an empirical reality, a thing that we can find in reality, no? That use a text, but it's not a concept. Yeah, I don't know if you realize that the laws could be written in some books, in some I don't know, used to be published at the very beginning in some official gazette or newspaper or bulletin or kind of that. No, it depends the name in each state. No, in Spain is the bulletin, official bulletin. In Italy is the gazette, and in Ecuador is register. Well, have to be written in some place. But in any case, that is not the most important thing. No, the most important thing is what is written. No, the concept. No, but for Jhon Austin, he was absolutely an empiricist, and he said, well, we have to obey laws because there is a punishment, and we find the law especially in the reality. You know? If once another way to understand law also in this place is not only the written thing, but also the things that in reality are the rules that people used to follow, and used to follow. Why? Because if not, there will be some kind of sanction. There will be some kind of punishment. So this is the first idea. And then he made a lot of classification, but a lot. You will see in the reading that you have of works. Well, so many theories that he have of how we can divide law and put together, and what kind of relations could be between all these kind of law. But more or less the main ideas about the classification of the types of the laws, you will find here. No? First, there is a law properly so called. So this is what I say. No? A commandment imposed by the sovereign people, sovereign person, or subject, with a sanction. If you don't do that, you will have some sanction. No? So he said, if we talk about the law properly so called, you will find two kinds of laws. First, laws of God. Second, human laws. So in human laws, we can also find some types of laws. There's the positive laws. That's one that's said by the sovereign. That is the most important notion of law for him. And the laws set by or determinate body, not as a political sovereign. No? So which kind of law could be there? Well, a political body, for example, a company, or well, a community that put some kind of rules for the community, but that community is not the parliament, is not the sovereign. So we can see that there could be also some kind of law. And on the other hand, he realized that there are so many things that people used to call law, but it is not properly a law. So there is some kind of law improperly so called. And what kind of things we can find there? Well, within the province of jurisprudence, in our field, especially, we can find declaratory laws, the Declaration of Human Rights, for example, permissive laws. Remember, his main notion of law had to be with punishment, yeah, with punishment. And if there is not any kind of sanction of punishment, there is not law properly. He said that, obviously. No? So, but he realized that there are so many laws that allow you to make so many things, you know. So he said, well, we can say that those are also law, but improperly so called, you know? And laws of imperfect obligations. You know? There are so many kind of imperfect obligations. You know? Finally, we can find also laws by close analogy and by slender analogy. By close analogy, we can find their morality, the positive morality. Remember that we are in a century, a positivistic century. And all people, when talk about morality, are thinking about a set of rules that probably society will impose to us without any reason, because they have the power to impose us, you know, this kind of things. No? We will normalize him, but for me, it's a superstructure, this kind of things. Well, more or less, that kind of ideas appears in that century, and more or less, Austin had some kind of these ideas. No? So morality is, he says, well, morality is law also, no? That an analogous law is not the properly so-called law, but is a kind of very similar, it's an analogy law. And the same happened with international law. Now, especially public international law is very well developed. There are so many agreements in force, and you have to obey all of them. But 1 century ago, and worse, 2 centuries ago, it was so different. International law was a science of principles, and that nobody had to obey. If you obey, it's okay, because well, you give your word. You say that I will do that to the other nations, but it's not properly a law. It's more or less like morality. At that time, 2 centuries ago, international law. And that's why he said, well, international law is not a law, properly so called. No? Is just like morality, no? It's a science of principles that you have to do, and it's good to do. You ought to do, but it's not what is, no? The thing that you have to obey, because there is a punishment. Because in the international law there is not kind of punishment at that time, no? Especially nowadays is so different, no? And finally, we can find laws by slender analogy. What kind of laws? Well, for example, well, not to talk when you are eating some food, because people will realize that it's not so elegant, that kind of things. Well, not to talk so loudly, so many things, well, that have not to be with morality, but deals with, well, there's elegance and behavior, any kind of behavior norm. So more or less, this is the scheme, and he put also so many relations between the improperly law and properly law and kind of that. Well, this is Jhon Austin, but I want to wait. I want to show you one thing, but first I need some comment of you about Jhon Austin. What do you think about this theory and this approach to the law? For example, one of the most important critique to Jhon Austin is there are many kind of laws, and properly called law, well, that allow you to do so many things. The sanction is not needed in the concept, but he said, no, I realize that there could be so many kinds, but the properly law must have some sanction. And another critique said, well, why we obey the law? We obey the law because there is some sanction, there is some kind of punishment, and the law needs the sovereign, at least in the main concept. I don't know. What do you think about these kind of things? I repeat, for example, one question. No? Why we obey the law? Yes, Ali.
Okay, for me, I think we don't necessarily obey the law because of the commands and also because of the sanctions, but we also obey the law, or we necessarily obey the law because of it being part of us and also protecting the social contract.
The social contract. Yeah, okay. Okay.
Okay.
Well, there is a great question. If there is a social contract, where do you sign that contract? Well, some other wants to say something. Why we obey the law? Do you think? Yes.
I wanted to say that in my opinion, the law is the normal. It's the starting point. Yeah, it's the default. because the law has been structured to protect and facilitate for people to pursue their personal interests. So already the law in a way has been made to favor your interest. So for you to violate the law, for you to disobey the law would indirectly also mean that you're going against your own personal interest. That's my opinion. So
It's
the law
because
basically,
it's because of interest, you say.
yeah,
You're interested in that kind of things. Ellen,
it favors
Hi,
you to follow.
Professor.
hi.
Hi. So for me, can you hear me?
Yes.
For me, I think I obey the law because of the common good, and not for the common good, and for the good that I want to achieve. And I'm looking it from this scenario. For example, for me to sit the exam, I need to have attended the two-thirds of the lecture. But the reason as to why I attend the lectures is not necessarily to do the exams. There's more to it. I need to excel, and there's something that I'm looking for. So basically, it is not the sanction that if I don't, like in this case, the sanction would be that if I don't attend the lectures, I won't do the exams, but there's more to it. So for me, I would say most of us, we obey the law because of the greater good. Yeah.
Okay. For the greater, I will try to defend Austin now. I will put in his point of view, and I will say, well, that the thing that you just said, no, is because, well, for the common good, but if you try to see the same example, no, in another way, this way, no, if you don't study, you will not approve my subject, yeah, you will not approve, and that is a kind of sanction, that is a kind of punishment. So at the end of the day, you are attending my class because there is a kind of thing that you will lose if you don't follow the law on one hand, and on the other hand, I'm trying to defend Jhon Austin now, no? And on the other hand, what do you think? There could be any legal system without punishment, without sanctions? If the law have no sanctions, what do you think? People will obey that law? Perhaps at the very beginning, some of them, if I say, well, I will ask you to pay me your taxes, no? But I never put any kind of sanction. How many people will obey the law? What do you think about that? If there is not sanctions at all in the legal system, how many people will obey the law? Yes, Effie. Or Effie.
In my opinion, I would say that if there was no threat or punishment, very few people would follow the law. However, although I give Austin credit for, coming up with the three-part, there has to be command, there must be a sovereign, and there's always a sanction. I feel like that is a very simplistic idea, because he made a one-size-fits-all, like a mathematical equation for life, and life in itself is not something that is 1 + 1. It's a very complex sort of equation. So for you to come up with such a simplistic answer or a simplistic deduction of that equation would be to ignore a lot of things. So I give him credit for it, because there is value in his argument, but at the same time, it's a very reduced argument. So I would side with Maurice and say that he was very naive and he ignored a lot.
Yeah, okay. Anyone else want to say something about this? why we obey the law. Well, I want to put you, yes, Ali.
For me, I think I agree with him on sanctions and why we need sanctions to obey the law. Because even when Kelsen was analyzing the pure theory of law, he talked about the necessity of sanctions to serve as a psychological buffer to prevent people from certain actions that are not necessarily actions about morality, but actions that have been developed through positive law. And he said that human beings actually require these sanctions to prevent them from exercising actions that are pure, actions that are pure and are not actions about sociology or actions that are moral in nature.
Yeah. Well, about psychology, I want to put the other point of view of one great psychologist called Milgram. I don't know if you have heard something about Milgram experiment. No. Have you heard something about this guy?
The shock experiment.
Yeah. Well, perhaps at least one of you. Well, he was a professor of psychology of Yale University, and he did an experiment that was so amazing. Was against the ethics of the experiment, but in any case, he did. At that time, there were not so many rules. So I will put you a video about 4 minutes. Will last 4 minutes more or less about this kind of experiment. If you don't hear very well this, please let me know. But I will put this video.
Prof, we can't hear.
It's okay? No, or no?
No.
Wow, not at all? So I don't know what I have to do. Not at all, or just a little?
Not at all.
Oh, wow. What amazing problem. So let me find this. If I can find it, I think that this will be, yeah. Yeah, this will be. I will give you the same video in the chat. Now, please click in the YouTube link that I gave you the chat of this session. In any case, I will put also here, and you can find. Well, this is not. Sorry. There was everyone. Yeah, now it's in the chat for everyone. You can follow that link, and in 5 minutes, we will continue the class. In any case, I will put now. So sorry about this, because I will share also. Well, I don't know if you have access, have watched all the video now, but it's very incredible. 65% of the people put the max level of electricity. Yeah, obviously nobody died, but well, why people obey? I repeat the same question. Why people used to obey? We can find in that video so many interesting things, no? Well, there was not kind of punishment that the professor will have, no? Probably what kind of punishment could be? Well, not to receive the payment of the experiment is the only one, but this is not a problem, no? There was an evidence that so many professors of that experiment, well, suffered a lot during the experiment, no? Some of them also with convulsions, well, was really hard to them to have this kind of experiment, no? So nowadays, these kind of experiments are forbidden, no? Are banned at all, because are forcing to the people to make well, something that could kill some people, no? So now it's impossible to do that kind of experiment. That is very interesting to try to understand why people obey, no? There was just a man with a white coat, well, asking to follow the experiment because it must be done without not so much answer, no? There was just one answer, a little more elaborate, that is part of this exercise, that says, well, if the teacher asks to the white, the people of the white coat, if there could be some damage, he will answer, well, there will be no permanent tissue damage in the body. So, and that's the only thing that is not clear in that video. That is very interesting. So that is very interesting. Well, Ali, you raised your hand.
I have a question.
Yeah.
But wasn't the Milgram's experiment subjected in the criminal justice system in the United States of America in the 60s, 70s to sort of electrocute offenders and actually electrocute them as forms of death penalties? And my question is, what sort of sanction is that? Is that sort of good sort of command that Austin was speaking about?
Well, I think that sanctions are, well, could be in so many ways, no? I don't know if I understood very well your question, but in any case, well, I think that the experiment shows the contrary, that probably without any kind of sanction, because if you think about why the Nazis they obeyed to Hitler, so you will think, well, it's because if they didn't obey, they will be punished, no? And it's so easy. If you say just a word against Hitler at that time, you have the penalty, of death, no? So, but in this case, it's quite different, because there was not any kind of sanction. There was just a rule, and you have to obey that rule. And that's why, following that rule, well, these things happen, no? This is the interesting thing of this experiment. Well, probably we obeyed the law because so many things, because there is a punishment, and also because, well, we are accustomed to obey the authority, and also because we realize that it's a good thing, It will help people, it will help us, it will give peace to society. It was also, there could be so many answers, and probably all of them we can put together, are not exclusive answers. But it's very interesting, the idea why we obey. No? I think that the most human way of obey the law is understand why we are obeying. No? And if you understand, well, this will help the society, and that's why I obey, well, it's the most human way of obeying the law. And if you obey just because there is a punishment, well, you are acting more or less like an animal. Yeah, like Pavlov's experiment. Yeah, if I don't obey, I will be punished. So I want to go ahead with our lecture. Now we will talk about Hans Kelsen. Are you sure you have heard about this guy? This guy when he was younger. For sure you have heard so many things about him. What things you can remember about Kelsen? No one of you wants to say, remember nothing. At least one idea, yes, Ali.
I think for me, I'd say the pure theory of law, and secondly, the grand norm, and how the grand norm is designed to offer systematic study of law.
Yeah, he was the author of the grand norm or not?
He was the author of the grand norm.
Well, no, but yeah, so many people. The grand norm, remember when there was so many grand norms in the antique Greece, then in the United States, 1 century before, there was a lot of theory of the grand norm called the Constitution. Well, but yes, the theory of the pure theory of law is one of the most important things. So many people say, no, he was a German, and he wasn't. He's from Austria or not? Well, precisely, he born, and that's why I put here also in Prague. He born there. Now he's part of another republic, but well, and he died in California, United States. Why? Because in the Second World War, he moved to the United States Academy. Then he taught there, no? But well, there was a very interesting life that we will take care about this. So we will begin with the notion of law. He talked about so many things, but he began with the distinction of sane and solid, and what is and what ought to be. This is, as you will remember, Kant, no? Kant again. So many people say that he's a great follower of Kant. In reality, he's not just a follower of Kant. He's a follower of so many philosophers, but his principal structure is Kantian, especially Neo-Kantian. This distinction between is and ought to be is especially acute in the followers of Kant, the Neo-Kantian. No? So he said, well, we have kind of rules, we kind of system of rules. No? One with coercion in reality, no, and another one without coercion, and the first one is the law, and the second one is morality. No? Morality is what it is, and sorry, law is what is, and morality have to be principally with what ought to be, So he said, I want to study law, not morality. I want to study the things that are, that are in reality, because we want to do a great science, So more or less following Austin, more or less, law has only one function, to monopolize the monopolization of force, of coercion. I don't know if you realize that more or less he puts first the definition and then put the function that is exactly the same. He say that there are two systems of rules, one with coercion and another without coercion. And so the rules with coercion have the function of coercion. It's a tautology. yeah, it's a tautology there. In any case, well, as you see, he follows so many people. Kant, the scheme, the great scheme, all of these people more or less follow the great scheme of the Kantian scheme of the distinction between the things that are mine and the things that are outside of ourselves, and there is no connection. No connection. Well, so as I told you, at that time, think about the very beginning of the first of the 20th century, there was a lot of anthropologist studies, a lot of social theory studies, research, and kind of that. And for the people that studied law, well, they realized that, well, this kind of descriptions, remember Malinowski saying, well, that in any culture we find so many things, and the principle of reciprocity, and we can find in any town of the world, and so on. No? But he realized, well, in law, we have this kind of research doesn't help so much to us. I want to do a pure theory of law. I want to take only care of what is law, not what is social theory, anthropology, metaphysics, or kind of that. I want to be focused in what is law and make these studies a science, a very good science, a very deep science. And so I want to exclude that the consequence is that we must exclude all things that are not law from our analysis. No, must be restricted to norms. If we want to study laws, we will study just the norms. Yeah, the ought to be. Well, there is a so. And that's why he divided into two kinds of norms, as I told you, two kinds of rules. And so it is very interesting, but I don't know if I will be able to put now. In any case, it is very interesting that he rules out all that cannot be objectively known. Remember, the positivist approach. We want to try to make science, to study the positum, the things that are placed, and all things that are objective and not the subjective opinions of the people. It is not science. No? So what we have to expel out, what the social purposes of the law, no? The political functions of the law. We will see that just the only function that we will study is force, how to enforce the law. And history is also rule out and spelled politics also, and sociology and morality. But this is an interesting thing. I will put you, well, for me at least, there is a doubt how much Kelsen achieved his goal to expel all these kind of things. I think he didn't achieve that goal. Especially, I will begin with morality. But then I will explain a little more of these kind of things. So here is a lecture that he gave in 1952 in the University of California. But please tell me if you can hear it. If not, I will give you the link again. It's just an audio. You can hear?
No.
You can hear or not?
No, we can't hear.
Oh, well, what a pity. So let me see if I found that link. And copy this paragraph from there. Let me see if no. So copy link. Well, now you will find the link in the chat. So it's just, the problem is because first the presentation, and then he put an example of Jesus. It's incredible, no? About what is true. Pontius Pilate, and then more or less in the minute, at the end of the minute 2, and the whole minute 3 is talking about what is justice. So if you want to hear his voice at least one time in your life, it is a good opportunity. So I will give you 3 minutes, and you will hear Kelsen directly, but put between the 2nd minute and the 4th minute, 2 minutes to hear. Okay, the link is there. In any case, I will share my presentation.
Just a question. What are we focusing on in the 2nd minute and the 4th minute?
Sorry?
What are we focusing on in the 2nd minute and the 4th minute? What should we look out for? The definition of Kelsen's justice, or? Yeah,
I will answer this, but please, now let's hear Kelsen's voice for all of you. We are giving now the 3 minutes for hear Kelsen. So, well, I don't know if you have heard at least the first minutes of the speech of Kelsen in California. Do you? Did you?
Yes.
Okay. It's very impressive to hear Kelsen directly, no? It's very, very, very interesting. I think that, well, this is a synthesis of his thought, more or less, and there you realize, well, for Kelsen, the legal system is a legal order, a social order first, and then that had to be with justice, as supposed to be with justice. Justice is also a virtue. A secondary meaning of justice is a virtue. And then the most important thing that, for me, at least in this lecture, is he said, "What? And what is justice? Justice is happiness." Happiness. So we remember, no, the notion. So he realized that all the legal system had to be with happiness. In some sense, he didn't explain very well. Then he adopted a relativistic approach, not to say, well, anyone can decide what is happiness, no, without any kind of limit. There is at the end of the day, there could be no science about happiness. So we can say that he's using the classical approach of morality to say that there is no more morality in the social system, in the legal system. But it's very interesting. I agree absolutely with Kelsen that social order, any kind of social order, especially the legal system, have to do with happiness. Yeah. But I think that Kelsen is a good jurist, but not a good moralist. So when he explained morality, he said, well, happiness could be anything. There is not reason behind the ethics. So in any case, let's follow our presentation of Kelsen. So it's very, very interesting because he said, well, law is just a rule, or more or less, that have coercion. If it doesn't have coercion, it's not a law, but morality. So, well, now, someone of you, Ali, you told me. Now you can ask any question if you have, or make any comment if you have.
Okay, my comment is this. You say that he's a good jurist, but not a good moralist. What is the substandard sort of difference between a jurist and a moralist?
Well, he takes care very well about law and say so many great things. I agree with him about law. But when he talk about morality, he knows law but not morality. It is obvious, because he says, well, we can separate, and there is there is very distinguished orders, morality and law, but he doesn't realize very well which kind of connection could be between these two kind of systems. Yeah, that's why. Why? Because he don't understand very well morality. For he, as for Austin, as for Bentham, moral and as equal as so many authors that now are alive, they understand morality more or less as I told you, as a set of rules imposed by God or by the religion or by the society or by anyone who knows and who could be. But it's an external thing. And morality is not the best way to understand morality. The best way, I think, this is try to think what could be reasonable. But that was our first lecture. So let's go again with Kelsen. No? Kelsen developed all his idea about law, especially about validity and efficacy of the law. And what things he said about validity of the law? First, that there must be a norm that grants the validity of all laws. Of all laws. It is very interesting. No? Think why what could be the foundation of the whole legal system? He said, well, there could be one norm. No? Must be the grand norm, the Constitution, no? In order to be valid. Must be authorized any norm by another norm, which in turn is authorized by a higher norm in the system, the ground norm. No? Then he have a relativistic approach. No? He was absolutely relativistic in morality and also in law. No? A moral and a legal order, well, it depends of the society, of any person, of the interest of any person. So he realized, no, this photo is of Kelsen in the end of the days. No, the last one was the Kelsen in the middle of his career, and it's very interesting to know that Kelsen's position, Kelsen's positivism, was more extreme at the end of his life than at the very beginning. At the very beginning, he think that probably natural law could have some reason, but then he opposed absolutely to the natural law. Also, and at the very beginning, he thinks, well, law have to be more or less with social facts, but at the end of his life, he realized, no, it's just fiction, and he adopted and he followed a philosopher called Ballinger, that is an author called the fictionalist theory, and he thinks, no, this is just a fiction, a mere fiction with no connection with reality. But at the end of the days, he said, no, any will of the sovereign could be norm, any will. So there could be also the will of the Nazi regime. So it is a norm, and without any problem, could be good, could be bad. This is ought to be question, but it could be, and we will study just law. any norm can say, well, anything about you. Ratz says, well, a critique to Kelsen relativism, although Ratz is more or less in the same approach. He said, well, for Kelsen, he said no, that, well, each legal system has its own set of values, and with that values, he realized what is legal, what things have validity, and also in morality the same. No, if something may have any kind of validity, then it's moral, more or less. No, so the critiques of Ratz is that Kelsen agreed that something is true because he said that is true, and you have to act because that. No? It is true that a racist should be behaved in a racist way. Well, this is the critique, no? So, and he distinguished validity from efficacy. Two great concepts. Well, I think that there are a lot of good things, but he said more or less like another author that you will read, that there should be a general adherence to the grand norm. Why? Because if no one follows the grand norm, the constitution, there is no law in that country. No. And I remember now so many countries that have just a constitution of paper, no? That nobody obey that constitution. I remember so many cases in so many places, in so many countries, especially in South America. Probably you will have in mind some country that only have a constitution, but nobody obeys that constitution. And instead of that, from time to time, people obeys the last constitution, not the actual constitution of the state. So it happened, and he realized, Kelsen, that if this kind of things happen, we can say that there is not grand norm, there is not legal order, there is not any kind of foundation of law, because there is no grand norm. There is not the first stone, so all the building cannot be built on that stone. So the principle of legitimacy is restricted by the principle of effectiveness. So one norm could be great on paper, but if nobody obey, there is no norm, no law. There is no that state. And in that way, he explained the revolutions. When the new laws of the revolutionary government are effectively enforced, lawyers presuppose a new grand norm. It is interesting because you can have two kinds of revolutionary battles. No? The first one of the warriors fight, but never are able to conquer the power, to have the parliament and to put his rules, their rules. No? And this revolution will never change the grand norm, neither any law. But if some movement change the grand norms, all laws will change, and if the people obey in some way that movement, there will be a new legal system, a new grand norm, and so a new legal order. This is the way of understanding it. Well, it's obviously he's talking about efficacy and the relation with efficacy and validity. He put together in these kind of things. But on the other hand, remember, he's trying to talk about the thing that must be, and he put a distinction with the world, no? So I don't know. I will show you a little more about Kelsen, but now I don't know if you have any questions, if you agree with Kelsen, if you are against in one point with Kelsen, or in all points of his theory of law. What do you think? Question, for example, do you think that it's possible to make a pure theory of law? Yes. Go ahead, say something.
I think the one thing I would adopt from Kelsen is that the legitimacy of a pure theory of law plus the validity, with the two sort of concepts that I grasp, validity of the law and efficacy, can actually change a grand norm that violates the rights of part of the citizens to achieve the greater good of the whole society. What this means is that, for instance, at a point where there is a minority group, right? And that grand norm at that point in time is sort of suppressing the minority group. For instance, in the United States of America, they had a grand norm that legitimized slavery. But until there was a form of a revolutionary war through the American Civil War to have the 14th Amendment, to present the 14th Amendment to create a new grand norm. So this sort of principle, sort of concept of validity and efficacy is really good. But again, I don't necessarily agree the sort of law can be extremely as pure as he says to eliminate sociology, morality.
Yeah. As I show you, Elvis, well, you want to say something? Elvis.
Yes, yes. I wanted to say that on your question of can there be a pure theory of law, I would say no, based on the fact that Kelsen tries to create a distinction between law and morality. But if we go back to your previous lecture last week, where we talked about the corpus juris civilis and that whole history of the law coming to be as it is right now, we see that according to the Romans, they always recognize the fact that positive law was always trying to mirror natural law. So by virtue of the fact that now he's referring to the pure theory of law and trying to make a distinction that this is purely law and it has nothing to do with morality, I feel it's an oxymoron in itself and it will lead to disaster eventually.
Yeah.
I don't think we can have a pure theory of law because of the restriction it has to the analysis of the norms, and also because of excluding like the social purpose, its social purpose and political functions. In my opinion, those are very important factors of law itself. So I don't think we can have a pure theory.
Do you think that Kelsen was able to make his great aim of a pure theory of law or not? Was able him? Wasn't it him?
I don't think so.
Yeah, why? Why? What kind of things he put? What kind of impurity things he never expelled out from his theory? Mungai. Okay. Do you want to say something?
Yes, sorry, I was muted. So in my opinion, I think Kelsen was trying to make a perfect textbook example of what a law should be without taking into account the reality that law is meant to be for people and is drafted, that the law is drafted to cater for the needs of human beings. And when you consider the needs of human beings, then when you can't begin to remove the purpose of the law and the individual or subjective morality of these individual peoples, you couldn't remove the purpose of the law, the political purpose or the social purpose of the law.
Yeah.
When trying to apply this law. So for me, I think his law was a textbook example rather than a realistic example of what the law should be.
Yeah, and as we see, we saw, there were so many impurities that he put in his theory. First one, the philosophical approach of Kant. Remember, Kant, with the same approach, used to talk about natural law. So Kelsen, with the same approach, dividing the is and out, expel out morality and expel out natural law. So, second, he used another philosophy. He tried to put outside all kind of metaphysics, but he was married with the worst metaphysic, the fictionalist of Ballinger. This is the worst metaphysics theory, I think. So he thinks that anything can be law, anything. It's just the will, is just the will. Remember this word, is just the will of the sovereign, of the emperor. If the emperor says something, it must be the law. So it is very interesting because for Kelsen, and it's very clear this, especially at the end of the life of Kelsen, the law is just the will of the ones who have the authority. It's just the will. It's not more than a will. So it could be any kind of law. So I want to share now another that's the last idea of Kelsen, debate. Well, for sure you remember this pyramid, don't you? Yeah, the basic norm, the derived norms. And at one time, one part of his career, he realized that there must be some dynamic approach to this theory. That was not a theory of Kelsen, by the way. All people say, well, the pyramid theory of the legal system is from Kelsen. No, it's not from Kelsen. It's from this guy, Adolf Julius Merkel. Merkel is a follower of Kelsen, and Kelsen appreciated so much this disciple, and he puts in his book, in his theory, Pure Theory of Law, an introduction that says that Adolf Julius Merkel is a co-founder of the Pure Theory of Law, because he puts the image of this structural system based in a basic norm in this way, and the process that they make. So the normodynamics say that all the norms produced in the system must be according with the process that are stated in the basic norm. So it's not just a question of validity and efficacy, but it's also a question on how the legal system developed itself in the time. So this is a new development of the pure theory of law, with the help also with Merkel. So it is interesting. So the great problem for Kelsen is because is this. Do you know where this place is? I put you in the website, for sure you will remember. No one of you knows about where this place is?
Nazi Germany.
Nazi Germany, but which city or which place?
Nuremberg.
Nuremberg, yeah. Here it was one of probably the greatest exhibition of the power of the Nazis, no? And this is very well very good picture, very good photo, because it shows all the power, and it shows how the system of the Nazis was enforced, no? Why the people obeyed all the laws of that regime, because there was a lot of force, there was a lot of fear, and so that's why it was incredible, no? And that's why when after the World War there was some peace in the same place of this exhibition of force, Nuremberg. They used the same place to make all the trials against the Nazis in the same place, and it is the trials of Nuremberg, and well, where all the countries, you can see there so many flags, no, of many countries, also from the United Kingdom and the United States and well, some other countries also, no. They are judging all the Nazis, and so many cases. One cases, for example, is the case of a wife that accused in front of the Nazis that her husband was saying bad things about Hitler and so on. At the end of the day, that guy was in front of the judge and he died because that was the punishment because the wife stole that. No? So with the legal theory of Kelsen, we can say, well, this is law, this is the law, and we have to obey that law. As you hear in that speech, well, we want to be happy, but there is no criteria to say how can achieve happiness. So finally, we have to obey law, and this more or less will be our morality. So in any case, it's incredible. Now with the same theory, we can approve all these kind of things and say, well, there is no great problem here. It is law. One thing is law, and another thing is what ought to be. Morality can propose us so many things, but we have to follow law and to obey the law, and that's why. And that's why Kelsen was not very quoted in that trial. Instead of that, there was another guy, a follower of natural law, called Gustav Radbruch. Gustav Radbruch say, no law can be barely unjust. It is very interesting. No law can be barely unjust. So this is probably the most quote phrase, the most cited phrase in these judgments. No, so probably there could be in the regime Nazi regime so many laws, And probably all of that people say, well, I was just obeying the law, no? But Radbrook said, well, you can have so many kind of law, but if it is so much unjust, so much unfair, that law, it will never be properly called law. So you will never have to obey the very, very quite unjust laws. So it is very interesting to remember Gustav Radbrook, a great jurist. So about Kelsen, any comment, question, idea? I don't know.
Yeah.
Michael.
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm one thing, right? So basically, his idea of validity of the law is that the norm, okay, for a norm to be valid, it must be authorized by, in principle, a grand norm, right?
Yeah.
Does he actually propose what, okay, or who or how the grand norm is made, or rather, is it just what he says earlier? It's just the sovereign saying something, and that's now the grand norm. Is that what basically he says?
Yeah, all the norms have validity if are according to the superior norm. Policy and regulation could be valid if it is according to the superior norm. That could be an act, and a declaration, or something else. Yeah, and that is valid also and only if it's according to the basic norm. So this is, let's see, here. And let's see, okay, no. I'm trying to find a spotlight, okay. And so, an agreement, a contract is valid is because only if it is according to the regulation, and the regulation, the policies in that kind of things is valid only if it's in accordance with the next level of norms. Could be any act, and these kind of acts could be valid only if in accordance to the next level, that could be the Human Rights Declaration. And the Human Rights Declaration are valid only if all of them are according to the basic norm. So finally, and it is a very interesting question, why the basic norm, the grand norm, is valid? This is a great question. Why the basic norm is valid? Because there is no any norm, no?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. So, so what we will say? This is the great question of Kelsen. And you know how Kelsen answered that?
Nah, I don't know.
Don't worry, because Kelsen didn't know neither.
What? Okay.
It's very interesting because it was so different, his answer along his life. At the very beginning of the life of Kelsen, he thinks probably it could be something related with natural law. There could be any kind of natural law. And at that point he said, well, this is the only similarity between the pure theory of law and natural law. Because we will, at the end of the day, we'll find the foundation of all the theory in a sociological thing or kind of that. So, but then he changed a lot the answer of that question, and he say, well, probably in history, on efficacy, as you will read in works. I don't think that works is so deep in this part, but in any case, At the end of the days, at the end of of his career, he discovered the international law. So he think, well, there is a new law that could be superior in some sense, that could be related with the foundation of the grand norm. Yeah. But at the end of the day, is just put the question a little more far. We can say, ask to Kelsen then why you have to obey. What is the foundation? Why the international law have its validity? No, it's just to put the same question a little far. No, this is the great problem of Kelsen. This is the greatest problem. Yeah. I will try to answer. I follow so much Kelsen. I really enjoy Kelsen, but I think that this is an incomplete theory. In 3 or 4 weeks, I will show you what I think that could be a complete theory of law. In any case, let's share. After that question and after this judgment, we will see the last of the author of today, Hebert Hart. Hebert Hart, I think that is a great man, a great professor of Oxford with a lot of incredible students, very famous students, like or kind of disciples, but that at one point all of them were against Hebert Hart, like Dworkin, like Finis, well, like so many others. So in any case, who is that guy? No, he's a professor of Oxford that realized that law is more than a decree of a gunman, no, a person who have the power. No, it's not just the Nazi regime. It's have something to do with reason. No, remember the phrase that I stressed out of Kelsen. No, law could be any will, any kind of will. Well, for Hebert Hart, it's not just will. It's not just will of sovereign. It have to be with more kind of things like reason, like history, and so many other things. You know? It is very, very deep, this idea. No? Very clever. So he distinguished two kinds of rules. These first rules, more sociological rules, and secondary rules that used to be applied in a state. Yeah, I will talk a little about this kind of two rules, and you will realize more or less the way of thinking of Hebert Hart. No? So the primary rules, when he distinguished this, he thinks, well, the primary rules are more of, well, we can see better this kind of rules in some primitive civilizations, in some primitive cultures that used to, well, to deal with some rules, as Malinowski shows to us. For sure you will remember not that, well, in some island of the east of the world, Papua New Guinea, well, they used to have some practice on things, and all people think that the rules of that society are the reciprocity and so many things, no? But when is organized the state, you will find another kind of rules. Well, and let's see. Let's follow the presentation. No. The social dimension of the rules. Well, in any case, both kind of rules are present in any society. No? More present the primary rules in the in the primitive societies than in others. No? Or there are social dimension of the rules. No? The manner in which members of the society perceive the rules in question, their attitude towards it. This is the social dimension of the rule. So the important thing is to realize for Hart that rule is not a mere habit, no? An habit of the will. I don't know if you remember some author that said that are just forms, that rules are just forms, things that we repeat, habits. I think that more or less all the anthropological approach used to see rules like a repetition of behavior, no? Of acts, of actions. It is mere habits. So Hebert Hart said no, it is not true, because people used to repeat the same actions because behind of all these kind of things there is some kind of reason. No? Rules are a manifestation of our actual behavior, yes, but also of our words and of our thoughts. So I think that he's trying to recover the role of the reason in the law. He realized, well, we lost the reason, no? the reason why laws have any sense. So, and what kind of reason could be behind all these kind of rules? So after that, he said, well, these are the primary rules, and then we will find a secondary rules. No? A secondary rules could be divided in or classified in three kind of secondary rules. No? The rule of change, the rule of adjudications, and the rule of recognition. The most important secondary rule for Hart's system of theory of law is the last one, the rule of recognition. But let's go little by little. First, let's talk about the rule of change. Well, in the secondary rules, we will find first that there is a rule that confer power on individuals or groups to enact legislation in accordance with certain procedures. For example, the parliament have some statutes rules that show to the people, to the society, which will be the process to approve, to enact, to enforce one statute law. Yeah, this is the process. No, and if this one law is approved by the parliament, well, the whole legal system will change. That's why he called that kind of rules rule of change. Yes, this is the first one. The second one, secondary rule is the rule of adjudication, and it is very easy also to understand the rule of adjudication, because we discovered that rule in any criminal case, no? When the judge say, well, you have we prove that you committed that crime, so I will adjudicate you some kind of punishment, prison, a fine, or anything else. No, is an adjudication of punishment, but also could be an adjudication of property. If the judgment is about property, there will be a decision of the judge that saying you have the property and you don't have the same property because it appertains to X and not to another people. No, so it's so easy. No, it confers the competence of individuals to pass judgment. Yeah, this is not so complicated. The most important rule, secondary rules for Hart, is the rule of recognition. Well, and I think that the idea behind that is very interesting, but very complicated thing, no? Because he said, well, how the society approves one rule. For example, there could be two constitutions in your country. One approved by somebody, some members, and another approved by some other. I remember also that in my country at that point there was a big battle, and there was 3 presidents, all of them trying to say, no, I'm the real president, and truly I'm the real president of my country. So which one is the president? Well, the ones who all the people follow him, no? Society must should recognize one rule as a rule of law. If there is not that recognition, we can say there is no law. This law is just a paper. It's just a word written by anyone, who knows who, but could be incredible written, but it's not law enforced by anyone because the society are obeying another kind of law. So the idea is very, very interesting, no? More or less is the same problem of Kelsen, for sure you will remember, no? Efficacy of the law. But he says, no, but all the laws of the parliament or things have to be recognized by the society. Well, at this point of the theory, I think that is a great idea. A great idea to say, well, society have to say something about all the rules, no, and have to approve in some sense and give validity to that rules, no. But at the end of the day, it's a very complicated idea, and the principal critique to Hebert Hart was about the rule of recognition. Why? Because it was a theory not well developed. And why? Because when Hart speak about the rule of the recognition, he used to say, well, where the people, the society express his recognition, their recognition to the laws of the legal system. Well, and he said, well, in the judge, in the parliament, or I put here just one phrase, no? Where this is said, what the king in parliament enacts is law. This is the rule of the recognition. So at the end of the day, it's the same, you know, the rule of adjudication. The same people that puts the law recognize the law. So adjudicate, recognize the law. So it's not so clear what is the notion of rule of recognition. So, well, and there was a great debate on morality and law between Hart and Longfuller, but I think that I have no time for about this. But you will have this this debate on another video that I gave you the link. In any case, I want to ask about these first ideas. No, I can make a synthesis. Well, for me, the great idea of Hart is that law is more than will. Have to do with reason, with the people, also, with the acceptance of and second one, the rule of recognition. The society must recognize that rule in some sense. How? Hart never explained very well, but there must be some kind of recognition. Then he developed some more or less the ideas of Kelsen, but in a greater theory, in a biggest theory that I think that is really clever. So I don't know if you have any kind of question or comment about Hebert Hart. Yes, Ali.
My question is, you said that Hebert Hart actually recognizes that the law is more than the will, that the law involves reason, and you also talked about recognition. So would you please talk about recognition, because I'm not getting clarity about recognition really well on my side.
Yeah, well, the good thing is that it's not clear neither for Hebert Hart. And that's why the principal critique is that Hart was not so clear in what is the rule of recognition. Durkheim will say that it's just a test of pedigree. Pedigree. If norms have the recognition of the society or the parliament of the judge, so it's law. And if have not that recognition, it is not law. It's just a test of pedigree, but it's a kind of recognitions. Nobody knows very well from who. He said, well, it could be the queen and the parliament and the judge. Well, there is so many places that he speak about this, but it's not clear. But it's a general recognition of the law. We can say that. I think that it is. I don't know. That he realized that there is also another primary rules, and between these two kind of rules, there is so many connections that you will read in the lecture in the reading of Walk.